Okay, everybody, this is SIC Talks number 97. I'm here with Danny Giacopelli, who is a writer and a newsletterer who I've admired for a while. He had a newsletter on Substack called Desire Paths that charted people following their passions to, let's call it, logical extremes. And so I met some kind of, or I didn't meet, but I was introduced to some fascinating personalities there. And then as I got to, linked to Desire Paths at some point, and Danny and I got into conversation and developed a little parasocial relationship like you do. And in doing that, I then realized Danny had spent a bunch of time at Monocle and was at Courier, the business or the magazine about small businesses, and that was recently acquired by MailChimp. And anyway, he emailed this week and said, "I'm launching a new newsletter. It's called For Starters, and it's about entrepreneurial culture and small businesses, essentially, or I presume like startup businesses." Danny, I'll let you talk in a second, I promise. And so I said, "Hey, man, come on SIC Talks and let's get into it." So anyway, here we are. Danny, welcome.
Good introduction. I couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm
Podcast
glad to
over.
hear that. Yeah, I'm nothing if not extemporaneous. You're calling in from London. First of all, thanks for staying up late for me. I appreciate it. How are things back in Blighty?
Not bad. It's actually been a week of unbelievable sun and warmth, which is really
Oh,
rare.
cool.
So, whenever it's like sunny outside in England, people go out in their shorts and sandals, and it's like it's LA in August. So it's been a good week.
Oh, that's cool. Where are you, in London proper, or are you someplace else?
I'm in London. I live in the Barbican, so brutalist central.
That's
They're as
so
central as you can get.
That's so funny. I'll have to introduce you. I happen to work with a guy who just moved into the Barbican a
No
few
way.
weeks ago. Have to introduce you to your neighbors. It seems like such an interesting building. So the Barbican, and Danny, please help me with details here. But the Barbican, for those who don't know, is this paragon of, as Danny said, brutalist architecture in sort of central West London. Is that right to say?
It's the city of London, so it's actually
Oh,
it's
it's more
in
east.
the
Okay,
financial, center, the square mile they call it. It's central. I mean, it's kind of a bit more east than like obviously Covent Garden, I guess you could say is like central, but it's pretty
sure.
central. Yeah.
But it is not only a paragon of the brutalist style, right, as made famous by our multiple Oscar winner, the Brutalist, this week, but also a building that is renowned for its human design within its living spaces and the strength of its community. And it's, like an analogy in New York would be the Stuyvesant Town prior to its acquisition by private equity or whatever. Like the sort of place that you wait for years to get into, and then when you get into it, you never leave. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, pretty fair. Yeah. I mean, it was this whole area of London was destroyed during the Blitz. So more bombs fell on this area than I think any
Oh,
other
interesting.
area of London. So it was kind of a wreck for decades. And in the 70s, they put out a bid for architects to kind of design something new,
Sure.
and it kind of popped up as like not really social housing, so it wasn't like low income housing. It was more an estate for city workers, i.e., financial workers who didn't want to go home to the suburbs at night.
Sure.
The flats were a bit smaller, right? They're kind of everything's a bit Jetson-like and kind of odd and fun. And yeah, I mean, since then it's kind of grown a reputation for being where designy people live. I mean, you get a lot of old people here who have been here since the
Sure.
70s. But yeah, to your point, I mean, there's a lot of greenery too, so it's not like uber cold. It's brutalism with there's waterfalls and parks and like playgrounds. It's pretty cool.
The old human brutalism.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been spending a bunch of time thinking about the Everson Museum in Syracuse, which is my hometown, which was designed by I.M. Pei and is another, example of brutalism, but it is very, it's a kind of a poetic structure, and it is not inhuman by any means. It's just like
Yeah.
very, very concrete and very rough hewn. Well, cool. Anyway, that's what a funny coincidence. I'll have to introduce you to Tim.
I mean, somebody
You
just
guys
moved
can.
in next door. It might be him, literally.
How funny would that be?
Yeah.
How funny would that be? Well, okay, so we found you at the Barbican in London, and on the eve of or just having started this new newsletter via Beehive called For Starters. It's a bit of a pattern for you, right? Because it's like between The Entrepreneurs, which is the podcast that you hosted on Monocle, then Courier, which is this magazine about small businesses and startup culture, and Desire Paths, which is, similar but different. And now For Starters, like we're in your bag here,
I just
right?
do the same thing over and over again and pray it succeeds. Yeah, I mean, pretty much. They all have a little bit of a different twist, but
Sure.
yeah, I am obsessed with small independent businesses.
Why?
And well, I think they're the best stories out there. I think they're the least told stories out there, even though they're probably the most abundant stories out there. I mean, every magazine you open, it's Elon Musk or Sam Altman or somebody
Cool.
like
Those guys
that.
are cool. I really like them a lot.
Super cool dudes. Yeah, really cool dudes. And yet 99.9% of businesses are like, the guy down the block who has a neon
Sure.
sign shop or who has a dog grooming salon or who's literally just doing anything and following their passion and making money from it. So, yeah, I mean, I got into that kind of rabbit hole at Monocle where I hosted this, podcast, The Entrepreneurs. And I kind of ended up going to Courier, which was a magazine all about small businesses. And then Desire Paths was my Substack that I launched to kind of tell the stories that are a bit weird. So,
Yep.
not necessarily small business owners. It could be anybody. I went on a road trip throughout Hawaii and I met this guy who was like pounding, poi on the side of the road. And he's like this taro farmer. And I'm like, perfect. Like, I want to know your story. Like, you
Yeah,
probably
for
wouldn't
sure.
hear that story in like Fast Company, but where do those stories get told? And that was Desire Paths. And now my new thing, which is a slightly different twist. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the twist on For Starters?
So for starters, I just see a huge gap for business media that helps small business owners kind of do their thing.
Okay.
If you're starting a tech company, you're starting an AI company, you're in Silicon Valley, you're raising VC, there's a trillion resources out there for you, right? There's Y
Sure.
Combinators of the world, all the accelerators, pitch days. But if you're launching a cafe or a jewelry brand or pretty much anything else, where do you go to get inspired and to learn how to do what you do? It's kind of fragmented, right? So it's, you Google around, you ask a buddy who has maybe done it before,
Sure.
but I don't see many centralized platforms that are like, right, you want to launch a vegan cafe in Detroit? Here's everything you need to know. Here's someone who's done it before. Here's advice. Here's a lawyer. Here's a Shopify expert. And that's kind of what I'm going to build.
So why do that as a newsletter or as a media channel? Why not just do that as a private advisory?
So it's a good question. I mean, I see there's a lot out there right now where it's a bit elitist and you have to apply and you have to kind of, I'm not going to name names, but there's a lot of like entrepreneur networking organizations out there that are a bit like, you have to apply and there's a wait list or
Okay.
you have to have a certain amount of revenue to join. I see what I'm building as you're maybe 23 years old, you're coming out of fashion school or you're coming out of culinary school. You might know a skill, you might have like a creative skill that you're really good at, but you might have no idea how to apply that to a business. I am not a business expert. I tell stories. So nobody would hire me to say, right, Danny, how do I grow a cafe? But what I'm doing is I want to build a platform where people can talk to one another, so peer to peer, and have experts who really do know what they're doing,
Sure.
and they can teach people. It's starting as a newsletter, but it's going to be a lot more pretty soon.
Got
This is
it.
just a
Yeah.
carrot.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of, I mean, twofold, right? One is my whole theory of super format, right? Which is where an idea takes takes shape in one format, one consumer touch point, and then can be adapted and migrate to, other ones, as many as it logically makes sense. So that was one part. And then the other part was it reminds me a little bit of Saloon,
Sure.
previous guest, Julia Harrison, and the difference between you and Saloon, and I mean this with the greatest of love and respect for Julia, but like she's I think the utility of this sort of occurred to her as it was happening, whereas I think you've identified the utility and gone, how do I build towards this? And I love both of those things, because I think like the serendipity of the discovery for her is so cool and so much a part of being able to transmit value to people is through enthusiasm. I also like the idea that you like are really thinking about, all right, at every need state, at every point of inflection, what do we have to drop in here, and how do we,
Yeah. I
aid
think
people in doing so?
Saloon's awesome. I think Saloon is like so cool. And I think you were gonna say the only difference is I'm not like a Gen Z, like, cool young,
You're
like,
not, you're not a cool young woman in Bed-Stuy.
yeah, exactly.
That is true,
That's also
but
true. Yeah.
we're not going to hold that against you. Yeah,
No, but I mean, yeah, I take your point. And what I want to do is, I want to build a newsletter first and build a really strong community. And, as they say, do
sure.
things that don't scale and help people out with like, if they're looking for something, I could connect them with someone else. And then down the line, I really want to build a platform where, we have members and join. When you start a business, the first thing you do is you go to, Squarespace, you go to GoDaddy, and then you go to for starters and you get your membership. And then you're connected to all these people who can kind of teach
Oh,
you
that's
things.
cool. Yeah.
And there's a library of video content, there's meetups. I have this wacky idea where I want to go on like field trips with people where it's like, you're starting a cafe. Okay, let's go to Tokyo together and let's learn from like masters who have nailed the cafe business.
Sure.
So there's, some fun things like that down the line, but that's
Well, that's
maybe
so
a couple
funny
years
because
out.
I mean, more given my background and my brain, I can't help but, and as you're saying that, I'm just like, oh, right. And then you go to ANA and you say, hey, ANA, the Japanese airline,
Yeah.
Bring us out to Tokyo and we will allow ourselves to be captured for content on this. And, that can go into your in-flight programming, or it can be in your in-flight magazine or on your website or whatever the case is. So
Yeah.
there's interesting like partnership real estate involved in all of that as well.
There is. And oh yeah, I mean, I'm aware of all that. I want to keep it a bit pure for the next, at least. I mean, it's always going to be pure, but I don't want to bring in kind of other things at the moment. I want to just build the
All right, I'm
community.
sorry, ANA. We have to strike that one from the agenda.
Maybe, yeah. But there are a lot of cool things you could do with small business advice and inspiration that is just literally it's not out there. I mean, nobody's doing this.
1,000%. 1,000%. I mean, and I guess my other reaction to it is I think a lot of people who are trying to engage with the SMB, as it's called, space, small business space, tends to think of it as a territory to conquest or a demographic to appeal to or something like that, as opposed to just a collection of individuals who are contending with and working towards, or contending with the same forces and working towards similar sort of goals, but all in their own individual ways.
And small business is one thing, and it's kind of interchangeable, small business and starter. So it's kind of like I want to use the word starter because the word founder is kind of like loaded, right? You're a founder. It's like kind of like,
that's interesting.
Oh,
Okay.
don't you think you're special? You're a founder. I mean, nothing against like the word founder, but it's kind of a bit loaded. If you're just like,
it's got. I mean, look, to again once again bring up our boys Elon and Sam. Like the idea of
the
founder
founder
culture at this point, or founder mode or whatever. It's sort of like,
right.
Yeah, you guys suck.
Right. But if you're in like Depop selling vintage vintage clothes, are you a founder? No, you're just like, you're a starter, right? So that's what you're just like, you're hustling. Hustling itself is kind of like, a bit cringe depending on like who you are.
Of course,
you're just making money doing what you love, and what do you call yourself? Well, this is a platform for starters. So that's kind
cool.
of
Yeah, and look, I think it's clever. I'm into it. It rolls off the tongue. It's obviously in the popular parlance.
Yeah.
Smart. Co-sign the name, Danny. Co-sign the name.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah.
All right. Well, okay. So one of the things you talked about was wanting it to be a place that people find inspiration. And of course, this conversation that I have as often as I can, weekly or otherwise, is about trying to engage with people that I think are interesting and understanding what interests them, where they take inspiration or whatever, through the lens of the articles that I pick out in SIC. And so I sent you a work in progress list of links this week, and you sent back some stories that jumped out at you. I said to you off mic that I was impressed by the breadth of the stuff that you picked from? Because while there's lots of stuff in the newsletter, usually most of the time guests are pretty focused around one or two areas that they are involved in, and you're all
Yeah,
over the map here,
I'm all over the map.
literally and proverbially, from Todd Snyder's new suits to the hardest working font in Manhattan to the nicest swamp on the internet, through to the dark Scottish Isle where starlight reigns supreme, as well as some others. Where do you want to start? What was the one that like maybe first got your attention or most got your attention?
I mean, I gotta say, I love your newsletter, by the way. I'm one of those people who would just, every time I get it, I'm just like, new tab, new tab, new tab, new tab. And yeah, I just wanted to say that. But let's
Thank
start
you,
at
dude. Appreciate that.
let's start at the London-centric article, for a few reasons. So that was the Lime Bike one. And,
Yeah. So this is
yeah,
just a bit of background. A English journalist, Jim Waterton, I
yep,
think.
Watterson, yeah,
Watterson, who was a part of a big British publishing concern until fairly recently, or Jim Watterson, and who left to start his own little one-person media company. He's done a bunch of really interesting reporting, very much in the vein of big media companies, but done it specifically about London and specifically about everyday issues that affect Londoners in ways big and small, but are not necessarily big issues. Bike theft
exactly.
was a big expose that he did a couple weeks ago, and now he's tackling Lime bikes and the fact that 1 in 12 is apparently faulty and should be taken off the road immediately, according to this report. So talk about that one. What was it that
Yeah.
grabbed you there?
Yeah, I mean, I just loved I mean, to your point just now, I do love what he's built. And even to back it up a bit, I mean, London has not had a lot of good local media I mean, I've been here for 15 years. I've always wondered why has nobody started the New Yorker of London, and
Mm,
there's never really been anything but the Evening Standard, and obviously the big newspapers who cover London inherently. But now there is. Now there's not only what Jim's doing with London Centric, there's the London Minute, which is run by a really interesting guy here. There's the Londoner, which is another one of these kind of like newsletter first London focused media
sure.
companies. So I'm just really impressed by what all these people are building, because they're, to your point, they're really uncovering some interesting stuff. With this particular article, Jim went out on the streets of not far from where I live right here, just like literally Old Street, and he went out with his bike mechanic, and they're like testing Lime bikes, and Lime bikes are the bike share scheme here in London.
Right.
One of them, one's Santander, another one's Lime, and like half of them are broken. They literally like touch the tires, they look at the spokes, everything's like falling apart, and it's just a really fun, like mini little film thing they did about like the broken bikes of Lime, and they interview a bunch of people. I just thought it was like a great piece of local journalism.
Yeah, it is cool, and it's interesting. I don't know what London is like as it relates to the proliferation of those bikes, but I ride my own pedal bike around New York all the time, and city bike e-bikes and city bike regular bikes are everywhere, which is on balance great, and I'm super into it. However, the people that ride them totally carelessly and do so in a way that, if the equipment went bad, would be an incredibly dangerous situation
Yeah,
for everybody involved. And so I just like I guess from my standpoint, I was just looking at this report and just going like, okay, the next time I see a Silver Surfer coming at me at 25 miles an hour barreling down the Williamsburg Bridge as I'm going up, like, what happens if the lug goes at that
and that's
point?
the point of and
Like,
that's the point of the article where the video. It's the customer's onus to report a broken bike, right? So if they
right.
encounter something broken, they have to, well, they should, do the good thing and report it. However, that doesn't lock the bike or anything. It sends it to their maintenance log, and at some point, maybe someone will come fix it. But if somebody's like, "Oh, the handlebar's off," that's still good to go, and you could kind of still ride it. And it's kind of funny in the film they interview one of the guys who's a contractor who picks up the bikes and fixes them, and he says users throw them on the ground because if they break, then they don't have to pay because they just report it as broken. So it's this kind of like crazy loophole where they break it after they write it to get out of having to pay for it. And he's like, it's just like, catch 22 thing where, yeah. And, in London, they're all over the place. They're in bushes, they're on the floor. They're like,
Yeah, sure.
there's like graveyards of them in the middle of the sidewalk. So,
Yeah. We definitely, I see some of that, but it's not, it is nothing like what I have seen, for instance, the scooter carnage in LA, where you're just like
Bird.
abandoned scooters everywhere, like thankfully that isn't the case.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, I really like and in fact, I wish, in some ways, I wish I was closer to London, because it would make me engage further with London centric. From my vantage, it's like, I think it's really interesting, but I don't get into the detail of it. So it makes sense that you would on that one.
Check out The Londoner too.
Okay,
it's owned by
cool.
Mill Media, I believe they're called. It's they own a few different media titles. It's really great, kind of like long form, like just great long form London journalism. And the London Minute is a newsletter by this guy Michael McLeod. It's links based, so it's just all the links you need about London every morning. It's all this stuff's new, so I'm excited because there used to be just nothing in London. So
yeah, no, that is really cool. Well, okay, so from London, shall we go to Scotland?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay,
I was just in Scotland.
Okay, flex, fine.
That's why I picked it.
Okay. So this is a New York Times story about a dark sky island off the coast of Scotland that is, I don't know what, I guess turning its back on the idea of modern lighting solutions so as to keep the sky bright.
Yeah.
When you went to Scotland, did you go any place resembling this?
No, I was in Glasgow, which is probably the opposite of this. But yeah, I mean, I just love the idea of a community coming together to make this happen, because there are 40 people who live on this island called Rum. It's 40 square miles, and it's been named a dark sky sanctuary by Dark Sky International, this nonprofit. There's only 22 places in the world that are given this distinction, and yeah, it just it's all the residents must commit to not having their lights on at night, I guess, and there's no street lights, and it's got to be pretty damn black. I just love it.
Well, I mean, or pretty damn bright as a result of that, right? Like you.
What's the darkest sky you've ever seen?
Well, the interesting thing about this is, and one of the things that I liked about it is that my dad lives in Borrego Springs in California, which is in abuts the Anza Borrego Desert State Park, which is a dark sky sanctuary as well. And so, like, whenever we get out there, it's the town itself, there's lots of lights, obviously, but you get a little bit out of town and it just, like, it goes, and you can see stuff that is really remarkable. Or I used to be able to, until I turned 40 and my eyes failed. But that's a whole different.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you're out in the Grand Canyon or in the I lived for a bit of time in LA recently for 18 months, and we would take road trips out to
Palomar or something like that.
Yeah, or just like the obviously Joshua Tree area, or your Santa Barbara. There's a beautiful desert, and the names escape. The Kuyama Valley. It's just absolutely stunning dark skies. You just don't get that in Europe that much because it's so dense, and there's not a lot of just like truly remote places unless you go to literally the middle of nowhere in Scotland or maybe Norway or something. But but yeah, I love it.
No, it is really cool. And I hope everybody gets a chance to get out there and see that. We get a little bit of it. I mean, like a pale reflection of it in upstate, which is great, and it reminds you of why these places are so important. But to actually go and see the thing in person is there's nothing better.
Yeah.
All right. So from Scotland, maybe let's go to Manhattan fashion boutiques. There's a story in GQ about that you picked out about Todd Snyder, the menswear designer who brought slim suits to the masses. So famously, he was behind the design of the J. Crew Ludlow suit, released in 2008, and he has then gone on to create a fashion line and retail boutiques under his own name. and is experimenting with looser silhouettes and so on and so forth. What grabbed you about this one?
I mean, I'm aging myself, but I graduated from college right when the Ludlow suit was like at its the beginning or at its zenith, so
Right, sure.
2008. So like, the J. Crew liquor store thing, like the
Hmm.
whole menswear scene, continuous lean, all of that was happening at that point. So the Ludlow suit was
Shout
like,
out, Michael.
yeah, exactly. That was like the thing, the Ludlow suit, and I was just smiling because that was such a particular silhouette. And now
Hmm.
this new suit that he's bringing out, I think it's called the Wive. It's the opposite, right? It's like really big lapels, like 70s kind of style lapels, really kind of like baggy, double-breasted.
Yeah.
Just shows how much fashion's changed in like 20 years.
Oh, 100%. And well, it's so that this one is it's the Wythe actually refers to the partner on the suit, which is a brand called Wythe, which is a Western inspired
Yes.
downtown New York brand. And so they're kind of collaboratively bringing the suit together. But you're right, it's a change in silhouette, it's a change in sort of details and styling. And the thing that's so interesting, I watched the Truman Show the other night with my daughter. She had never seen it. I hadn't seen it in many years. And one of the things, this is 1998, so it was made to be a slightly retrograde look at 90s fashion, that kind of classic, like if you follow the Instagram handle Classic Gap, for instance, or
Mm,
trying to think what the other one is. There's the that other retro Instagram handle. But it's all Armani, like the Armani suits and stuff. Jim Carrey in that movie, among other things, wears a jacket that has like a full belted back, and it's like a tweed sport coat with a belted back, and I was just like, wow, nothing like that has existed in contemporary fashion. Since I guess the mid '90s, and I think it looks kind of wild and cool, and I think it's
yeah,
coming back. So anyway, I
yeah.
predict the Truman Show as the next big style inspiration. All our fashion audiences, you can take that one to the bank. But
Both fashion and probably real life, kind of like dystopian, like real world zeitgeist.
well, it was so. Guy, I got to tell you, like watching the Truman Show with a 16-year-old born in, as you'd imagine, or she's 15, so born in 2009. Like I had to explain to her what the premise of the movie was because like we are so constantly surveilled all the time anyway now that the idea that it didn't exist before was very
Yeah,
weird to her. Like she was just
yeah.
like, yeah, but why are
Isn't
they
that
following?
Twitch?
Why? Yeah, I mean, why are they following him around? Why are they making a documentary about him? I don't understand. It was just like, yeah,
Yeah,
we didn't understand at that time what was coming, and yet here
yeah.
we are.
I know.
I bet, by the way, so you're one thing that would be a little crucible of interesting content for starters is, do you know about the WSA building in New York?
No.
Okay, so WSA means Water Street Associates. It is the former AIG headquarters in the financial district at 160 Water Street, and the building was bought by these developers who are from London, and who are doing a series of conversions of old office buildings as well as some new construction that's about bringing creative communities together into these, what I have been calling vertical artist villages. It's like it's artists and it's photographers, and they form the anchor and the sort of initial attraction, and then it's fashion brands, and then it's the services that support fashion brands, so PR companies and marketing companies. And I consult with a showroom called Plus Plus that has an office there, so I've been spending a bunch of time in the building. But it's 30 floors of essentially small businesses in art, fashion, technology, and so on. And you'd find it fascinating because you could just like kind of flip from floor to floor and just talk to everybody.
Yeah.
It is a controversial model because the economics are somewhat suspect, shall we say? Like that people are getting in for rents that seem very, very, very low, and then have payments that balloon over time. But if the building can prove its value as a cultural hub, then theoretically the rents
Sure.
are worth the payoff. Anyway, the reason I bring it up is that I was in the elevator the other day, and a guy said to me, he was just like, "Oh, you work in the building?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm 27." He's like, "Oh, cool. I'm on 26. I'm building an AI computer." And that combination of terms struck me, and I was just like, an AI computer, because, well, whatever, AI is on computers.
It's
Computers
an
are
odd, right.
And he's like, "Yeah, like, Minority Report, like, I'm building that computer." And I was like, "Okay, all right." So Truman Show and Minority Report, AI computer,
Right.
Vertical Artist
With the
Village, like
gloves moving scenes
it's
around, like,
yeah,
in
yeah,
the
exactly.
air.
Well, that was what I was trying to figure out. I was just like, but my background, I was like, "Oh, you must mean the individually addressable advertising billboards that Tom Cruise is walking by." So you're using
Oh,
AI
yeah.
to do customer profiling and figure out who somebody is individually, and then serve them an ad in that thing. And that's not what he was talking about. What he was talking about was moving shit around with gloves. But I just thought it was a fascinating revisitation of dystopia
Yeah.
from
Everything comes back
late
around.
90s cinema, or whenever that was.
Totally. Yeah, no, I mean, I got to visit that building. I have a dream of starting, like, I mean, I'm kind of letting the cat out the bag, but this is not for a long time. I want to do something called starter streets. So where
Okay.
we pick literal neighborhoods and profile all of the awesome starters in that either street or neighborhood and make it
Sure.
like a thing, right? So it's like, this is an awesome street. This is a starter street. Put the sticker in the window. We're gonna like make a real big like fuss about it. Get the local kind of government involved,
That's great.
or even like build streets which have small businesses. So like, let's design the ideal kind of street with small businesses on it.
We'll get in a room at some point and do some blue sky thinking about it. It's like I immediately go to, there's a town called Liberty, upstate New York. It's on the way to Livingston Manor, right? You've probably been to Liberty,
Yeah,
but
I know Liberty. I went to school
Liberty's
upstate New York.
oh, really?
Yeah,
Where'd you go to school?
yeah. Colgate.
Oh, no shit. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, right in that in that corridor. But Liberty has a main street which, on the one hand, shows these weird little sparky signs of life from time to time, and on the other hand, feels like downtrodden and sort of like at
Yeah.
the end of its life simultaneously. And there are a lot of towns like that in that zone. But you could just imagine a New York State government initiative with starter streets coming in and going like, okay, we're gonna revitalize Main Street Liberty and have it be this really interesting cultural destination, much in the way Main Street Livingston Manor has sort of become that under its own steam.
Super cool. Yeah,
I love
that's
that
kind
idea.
of,
I love that idea. There's a guy named Nimrod Kamer who did a very tongue-in-cheek version of that as a video for, what is the street that Chiltern Firehouse is on? Is it
Tilton Street? Yeah.
Is it Chilton Street? So
I mean, that street is, I mean, absolutely wild, high end.
Yeah, it really is, right?
I mean, that's where Monocle is. So
yeah, oh yeah, of course. Has Monocle always been there on Chilton Street?
I mean, when I started in 2010, it was there. But the street
gotcha.
back then was actually counterintuitively probably even more of what I would consider a starter street, because it was like the brass instrument store, like the bassoon store. There was like a store for like tall women. There was like a store that just sold like sitars. I'm not even joking. And
No.
I mean, now it's like all, I mean, it's very bougie now. It's like just kind of super high end.
This is the the razor's edge on which the Jane Jacobian dream of like mixed use street level cities runs, right? Like in a perfect world, you have the tall lady store, and you have the bassoon store, and you have the legacy whiskey store that I think probably is still on the street there, and then you have the little Monocle kiosk, the media store, and then you have the hotel and so on and so forth. But the gravity of some of those businesses sort of shoulders the other ones.
Well, the hotel, I mean, the hotel, is caught on fire 2 weeks ago, and now the hotel's out of action for years. And I've read that a lot.
Really?
And
I
the
heard that
whole,
there was a fire, but I didn't hear that it was catastrophic in that way.
yeah, it was like like a stone, or like a, maybe not a stone. It was like a piece of wood fell out of the pizza oven. So I hear, and the whole
Wow,
thing
really?
caught on fire. Netflix
Oh
was going
my
to have
God.
some BAFTAs party there the next
Yeah,
day or
it
the
was
next
on
week.
Valentine's Day, right? Like
Sounds
I
about
think it was
right. It
on
was a couple weeks
I think it
ago.
was on Valentine's Day that it
And
happened.
that
Yeah.
street really was holding a lot of the, the local economy, because, there'd be a celebrity staying at Chilton Firehouse, and they go to the Monocle Cafe, and then they would walk down and go to the, whatever store. And
Sure.
now with that out of action, I read it might take up to 3 years, for it to get back and up and running, which is because they have to
The
survey
whole
what damage.
hotel?
That's what I read. That's what I read.
Wow.
Yeah,
That
which sounds kind
sucks.
of crazy, but
It does sound kind of crazy.
I read up to 3 years to make sure that the
Wow.
damage was not like structural. Don't quote me on that, but we'll find that out if it's
Well, I
true or
mean,
not.
fortunately, we're not recording this conversation or anything, so
Whoops. Yeah, yeah. You know,
No,
it's
no,
kind
no.
of a,
Understood that this is not information that you're operating with, but rather that you've read. Um, wow, that sucks. I'm really sorry to hear that.
yeah.
But just to return to the top of the top, I love the Starter Streets idea. That's really cool.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm gonna
And
see if I can make it happen.
yeah,
Baby
and
steps.
I love the Better Homes and Gardens seal of approval, and it's
Yeah.
smart,
Put it in the
smart.
window and kind of rally and make it a real, support ecosystem where, I mean, what if, I mean, half of these businesses probably never even talk to one another every day. It's kind of like there's, the
Sure,
cafe down the road, and then there's the clothing store, but what are the chances they share tips about the strength of the local economy? I mean, I don't think it's that common. I think everybody has their blinders on a little bit. But what if you can make like an actual, real structured community of the local businesses that's beyond just like the Chamber of Commerce or whatever, a Facebook group, and make it a real thing?
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think the idea has some legs, but talk to me
That
in
no,
five
that is
years.
I think so too. I think that's super cool. All right. Well, so from hardworking small businesses to the hardest working font in Manhattan. Um,
Yeah, what an
this,
article that was.
I mean, okay. So first of all, shout out to Nick Catch Dubs, who has a newsletter called Catch Dini. Who Nick was one of the co-founders along with A-Track of Fool's Gold Records, and he was an editor at the Fader years ago, and is a sort of a designer and a brand consultant from what I can tell now. Um, Lovely dude, and somebody who is really down for the community, largely because I think he finds strong bonds with people through these obscure stories. So this is a story in something called Ars Luna, or yeah, I think it's Ars Luna, who which I had never heard of before, but it's about it's a deep dive into, as Nick puts it, the freaky keys and engraved quirks of Gorton, which was the font used on typewriter keys prior to the typewriter keys being printed. And so they had to be literally engraved onto the keys. It's fascinating.
Yeah,
And I am not a font guy, but I went way down a rabbit hole on this one too.
I'm going to go down the rabbit hole. I haven't, it's a 6,000 word article, so I haven't read the whole thing. I'm not even
About
joking.
essentially like a G that looks
Yeah.
funny. It's like
No, it's 6,100 words and 600 photos. So it's one of these like, one of those web pages you get and you're like, holy shit, like this is incredible. I don't know what it is, but it's incredible. So I've just called it out because I want to read it, and I have skimmed it. But man, what a cool piece of like multimedia that is.
well, and just I have not done any research into the person who wrote it or how it might have come about, but exactly to your observation about small businesses, it's like people they get an idea in their head, they get possessed by it, and they just follow it. And you can just imagine whomever it was that wrote this just going like, all right, I am in. I'm going to find everything about this at all. And then when I come out of it, it's going to go to a weird. I'm sorry, I don't mean to call Arslan a weird publication. It's probably not, but nonetheless, it is very niche and
Yeah.
specific, and it's probably not seen by a lot of people. And the net impact of this thing will be tiny, but they love it and do it.
It's
Blessed. It's
like, it
awesome.
reminds me of, do you subscribe to Scope of Work?
I do.
It's
Yeah.
it's a great newsletter about, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, manufacturing, building,
Yeah, it's sort of like
cities.
the workings of the built world or something like that would
That's a
be
good
a
way of
way to
putting it. That's a
yeah.
smarter way of putting it. And the tangents and the deep dives and the rabbit holes that
Mhm.
he goes on are just incredible. It's like I just love newsletters that are obsessive about particular things that you don't see elsewhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I'm gonna
that's it.
I'm gonna read this tonight. The
Well, okay,
the
so that
typeface one.
actually just to pivot a little bit from the list of stuff that you sent me. I love citing scope of work as an example of something that does this. What are your other go-tos? Like where else do you find value, inspiration, serendipity, et cetera, in your kind of media ecosystem?
Ah, that's a really good question. You're putting me on the spot. That's one of them, certainly. Scope of work. I mean, I did a big uh, emptying out all of the newsletters. I just subscribed to so many newsletters, probably not nearly as many as you, but I did a big cleanse recently, and I'm trying to like re-add them back to like what did I miss in my heart and that I need to fills, and then I resubscribe to them. So I don't have many that are just like my do or die ones. Scope of work's definitely one of them though. That every time I get it, I open it, and I think that's the good measure of a good email. I gotta say, Monocle has got the sister publication Confect, and Confect's newsletter is pretty damn good too. It's like
Oh, interesting. I don't actually
really
get I
long.
mean, I'm very familiar with Confect, but I don't get the newsletter. I'll have to sign up for that.
It's great. It's really, and it's different in many ways than Monocle. But it's obviously a publication aimed at like women, but it's not necessarily just for women. It's a pretty interesting kind of slant. But yeah, man, I subscribe to a lot of different things, a lot of weird things too. Everything
Yeah, for
from
sure. What
business to culture to
one thing I wonder if you have you ever heard of Messy Nessie?
no. What's
All right, so
this?
Messy Nessie. So I just discovered it this week as on the basis of a story they wrote about, or she, I guess, the woman Vanessa, who is the sole proprietor type person. She wrote about a magazine called the Paris Metro, which was a kind of left of center countercultural magazine in Paris in the 70s, run by expats, printed in English from what I could tell, but became sort of the height of fashion in a certain Parisian creative community for that reason. So I go into Messy. It's Messy, Messy, Nessie, Nessy, chic, CHIC.com, and it's she. From what I can tell, is like a vintage dealer or reseller who dabbles in blogging and sort of light touch journalism, has a bunch of, if I'm honest, like really regrettable programmatic advertising in there that probably provides some level of incremental revenue, and then sells membership to some of her guides about Paris, or these kind of expert opinions about Paris. But it was one of those things that I saw where it's just like it's very specific to Paris. It's very specific to this kind of vintage fashion first, culture forward person. It's done by her and one other person. It's monetized through advertising and through membership. And it's clearly like a pretty cool little side business that she does when she feels like it. And I don't think the media ecosystem of the future looks entirely like that, but it's going to look a lot like that at its sort of long tail level. So I just really like discovering stuff like that. And
Yeah,
I had never heard of it, but it's like everything is in it is very pertinent to the ecosystem that I, you know, engage with.
I'm gonna check it out right now. I thought of another one when you were talking about that.
When I was meandering.
No,
Go
no,
for
no,
it.
no, no. Um, I would say Craig Modd's newsletters are ones
Oh
that I
yeah, sure.
always open whenever they're sent out, just because I find his take on the world and culture and walking in Japan just really kind of singular and interesting. And I just love how he's built a career, out of making books, going on walks, doing pop-up newsletters, just doing things a bit differently.
Hmm.
And I just love it. So
Yeah, I'm gonna have to sign up for that one too. Craig is a name. I have a bunch of people in common with Craig, but I don't know him. I don't think we may have met years ago before he moved to Japan. But I hear great things, and yeah, we'll look that one up too. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
it's
Scope of work.
genuinely interesting.
Okay.
David Michon's amazing design newsletter, for scale is another
For
one.
scale. You notice that I'm wearing the hat?
Oh shit, I didn't notice that.
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
furniture, yeah.
this is an actual it's a 4 scale hat
Ah,
today.
that's so good.
Yeah, I'm in
David's
my
a
branded
buddy
merch
of
bag.
mine.
I've got my MoMA sweatshirt and my 4 scale hat.
Fantastic. Oh, he's gonna love that. I'm gonna tell him all about that. Yeah, I mean,
Do that. I don't know David. I love 4 scale and I
you got to get
admire
him
it, but
on the newsletter on the podcast. He's
yeah, maybe introduce us. I'd love to. That would be
yeah,
cool.
definitely cool. Yeah, I open that one whenever he sends it.
Yeah,
Not just because he's a friend. It's just a genuinely really really good, kind of funny, insightful newsletter.
Well, I love 4 scale for that reason, and it's the same as I feel about Sammy Rice's Snake, which is like those guys are so inside the furniture and design world that you read it as a tourist, and yet they make these things relatable in a way that it doesn't condescend, it doesn't pander, it's totally vernacular, but it's also totally unconcerned about whether you understand the vernacular or not. Like it's I don't know.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. Actually, yeah.
I love him because I feel like I don't want to say I feel like a student every time I read him, but I understand half of it, and then it sort of comes to me later sometimes, and I'm like, oh right, that's what we were talking about. Understood.
Yeah. Well, I'm doing hats very soon for starters. It's actually
Oh,
really
cool.
funny. When I was launching for starters, I mentioned it to David, and I was like, you don't mind that, like, I'm doing four and like a brand with like
Right.
it's like for scale for starters, and he's like, nah, don't worry about it. But it is kind of similar. So, but we do cover different things. But I'm gonna do hats very soon.
It's so interesting too. That I love that I admire your having that impulse. I envy it a little bit because I'm just like, if I'd come up with a name that was similar, I'd be like, yeah, do my name. I made up a name. I'm doing my name.
Yeah.
Names are easy. Everybody has a name. There's a zillion names. Make up a name. Like, what? Don't get in your bag about it. And then, but actually, you're right. You should ask the question because you might get some interesting tips, and worst case might avoid some quicksand. That
Won't get sued 5 years from now.
Exactly. Well, I mean, exactly right. You won't make a hat. You won't make a hat that says furniture, and then suddenly learn that someone else already made the hat.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I saw these hats and I was just like, okay,
that's a great hat.
That has this hat that says furniture. I just have to. It takes the dad hat to a real.
It's funny. I didn't realize it because it's obviously backwards and it's mirror image. Oh no, it's not.
Oh.
It's not mirror image. Actually, I was just blind. Yeah, there we go.
Like I said, Danny, it's, macular degeneration is a real thing. It's
getting old. 38. It's the end of the road.
Well, listen, we've got a few more minutes. I'm interested to go back to your list then and see what else we haven't touched on. Because I find it so interesting, the things that other people are attracted to in these stories. Let's see. We have not yet covered. Oh, this is an interesting one too, and it makes me think of the Real Housewives of Clapton. Shoppers turning to smaller food brands, cutting into the profits of conglomerates. This is from another widely read periodical, ESM magazine. The brilliant and encyclopedic Piers Fox sent this one along. What was it about this one that grabbed you?
So ESM is the European Supermarket Magazine, which is incredible. It's actually really funny. I'm writing my latest newsletter, and I found this magazine, this online newspaper called Olive Oil Times. It's all about olive oil, and I was just like, this is absolutely genius. Anyway, there's a newspaper for everything.
Yeah, well, let me ask you a question about that actually before we get into this story about the smaller food brands. One thing that has occurred to me, particularly in the last 5 years, but is that the what I would describe as an artificial distinction between B2C and B2B media is in many places disappearing. I think Monocle is actually a really good example of this. Maybe a foundational example of it. But I wonder, as you think about writing a publication that is B2B, in so much as it's about small businesses, right? People who are entrepreneurs, not necessarily their target audiences, but that is also meant to be, let's call it egalitarian in its appeal and provide tools for anybody, whether they're a business owner or not, to start. Like, do you think about a difference in tone or in style, I guess, in terms of
Yeah.
how you go about that?
Yes. I mean, to the first point, it is kind of B2B. However, the interesting space that I think for starters is going to occupy is not necessarily talking to small business owners, but talking to a wider group of people who are daydreaming about starting something. So they might not even
Sure.
consider themselves an entrepreneur at all. It's like they're just thinking what's on the other side of this kind of journey of entrepreneurship, like brand discovery, kind of looking at awesome people who have changed their lives through starting a company. So in that sense, they're kind of just normal people. They're not necessarily business owners yet.
Sure.
But for the people who have already started their business and are, they want to join for starters to get business tips, I just think so much business media is just so cringe and either cringe or formal, or it makes heroes out of people who shouldn't be heroes, or they they kind of lift up the acquisition of venture capital as if that's an end unto itself, when
Sure.
it's like most business is just not that. It's just, it's hustling every day, making money, pivoting a little bit, and repeating the next morning. So I would say like the stories that you'll read are just everyday stories, not that dissimilar to the stories we told at Courier, which were just like, hey, this is a cool business, somebody starting this like interesting thing, and not making it like founder mode, like, oh,
Yeah,
this is
fully.
it's taken on this like canonical kind of thing where we have to worship these founders when actually, I mean, why? I don't get
Right.
it. So it's kind of reversing a little bit of that, throwing some water on that a little bit.
Yeah. So all right. So now let's talk about ESM and European Supermarket Magazine. What was it
Yeah,
about
I
this
mean,
story?
so this was all about how, this mayo brand, Duke's Mayo,
Mm-hmm.
Is kind of growing more quickly than Hellman's mayonnaise in some supermarkets. And
Right.
this is, Duke's is cheaper. It's obviously much smaller than Hellman's. Probably tastes better. Its market share grew from 6 to 9%.
Don't talk shit about Hellman's.
Well, the weird thing is, and this
I
article kind
like
of makes
Hellman's.
Duke's to be like some like kind of small little upstart, but actually it's
Right.
been around for
Artisanal
100
thing.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Hellman's is great. Like, Heinz is great. There's a lot of like small ketchup brands that are different, but it's I'm not like one of these like snack boys who are like worshiping at the altar of like new brand just because they're new. Like,
Yeah. For sure.
Diet Coke's fine. Like, you don't necessarily always need, something new. However, the point of this article was that these insurgent brands are growing at a rapid clip. So it accounted for 39% of growth last year in the categories, these insurgent brands, up from 17%. And that's actually very interesting. These kind of like upstarts are growing more quickly. And,
Yeah.
obviously these
So
giant
the
companies are probably going to
interesting
try
thing
to
about
buy
it,
a
if
lot
I'm
of
not
these smaller.
mistaken, what's that?
I'm sorry. I think we cut out there. I think the internet and the Barbican is not as good as it used to be.
Oh no.
Am I back?
No. The interesting thing was that I think Duke's might have been. Oh no, it's not Duke's. Okay, sorry. There was it was there was a Unilever competitor to Duke's, or like a Unilever lookalike that I mixed up with Duke's and was like, oh, this is ironic because Duke's is actually a Unilever brand. It's not, it's also interesting because it's like now the megacorps are also going like, okay, let's make sure that we have our little baby competitor to this thing. Oh, that's Sir Kensington's. That's now I'm remembering it.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, those guys are interesting. Yeah, that's Scott Norton's company, or that was his company that he started.
Oh, interesting. Okay, and then sold it to
And
Unilever.
I actually don't know the full. I should know, because Scott's a friend, but I don't know who owns Sir Kensington's now. I don't know the story.
Yeah, well, but I mean, I think but that's the interesting thing about it, right? Is that these brands they start independent, they get sucked into the big companies.
Yeah,
They flourish or fail within the big companies, and then sometimes they pop out on the other side, and they take on other new lives. Interesting. I mean, you see this a lot in fashion, but I'm not used to thinking of food that way. But that is actually a trajectory in the food side too.
yeah, yeah.
Do you
So I
have
just like.
Duke's? I mean, is Duke's mayo available in London? Can you
I've
go to
never
your?
seen
Well, I guess
Duke's.
you're not a European. You can't. You're not in a European supermarket market, so you can't.
That's true. Yeah, thank you, Brexit. I mean, London has a huge variety of awesome food,
Yeah,
small little
that's true.
independent food startups. There's this really great company, shout out to Delhi, Delli, and they are a kind of online marketplace for these small independent food brands.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Really, really is a really strong independent food scene in London, like really strong. Um, so it's a cute dog. What kind
Yeah.
of dog? What kind of dog are we talking about?
we have a Labradoodle and we have a Bernedoodle.
Oh,
And
that's so cute.
they're both barking at the mailman right now. All right. Well, listen. So as to spare the audience all of the woofs, we're kind of at time anyway. But Danny, this has been such a pleasure to talk to you. I'm so glad
Yeah,
we
man.
got to chat and chop it up. I'm really excited to see what you do with For Starters, especially the kind of expansion of its universe. And if ever I or the SIC audience can help you, like let us know.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. I really, really appreciate it. Love it.
Dude, my pleasure. Keep up the great work. I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.